The following program may contain views and opinions which are not necessarily those of the Nine Network or its affiliate stations. It governs what you think. It motivates what you say. It drives everything you do. It's your worldview.
This week on Worldview, celebrating Christmas Down Under. And we review A Tale of Teenage Terror. Good morning, welcome to Worldview. I'm glad you could join us for our last program of the season. This morning we're looking at Christmas, how we Aussies have celebrated the holiday in the past and what it means to us today. Also this morning, Michelle Thomas reviews I Know What You Did Last Summer, a horror movie for teenagers. And later in the program, Doug Drinnan brings us the final instalment in his review of the Ten Commandments. But right now, a look at some of the main events in the news this week. Overseas, the Kyoto Conference on Climate Control saw developed countries promising to cut their greenhouse emissions by an average 5.2% for the year 2012. Australia was one of the few developed countries allowed to increase gas emissions. The conference agreed to allow Australia an 8% increase after Senator Hill rejected the overture of a 5% increase on emissions, fearing the limit would adversely affect our energy-intensive industry.
From an Australian perspective, it's a good day for the environment, but it's a good day for jobs as well.
And heartbreak for Russia as a military cargo jet crashed in a town in Siberia, killing more than 60 people. A criminal investigation commenced, the crash being the 44th air disaster to occur in Russia since last year. At home, the federal government announced its industry assistance package, worth $1.26 billion over the next 5 years and targeting annual growth of over 4%. The package included incentives for research and development and the export industry.
This overcomes a lot of problems that have had in custom and various other hoops that people have got to go through. It's really cutting the red tape.
I think that's a very important signal that the government's sending out to the business community, that it will support growth, that there won't be interventionist policies.
Voting for the Constitutional Convention concluded this week. Candidates described the response from voters as disappointing. Only 45% of the electorate returned their ballot papers. Some organisers blamed the system of voluntary postal votes for the poor response, but other commentators suggested that Australians are simply more concerned about other issues. In Queensland, rapprochement in the native title dispute. Aborigines, a mining company and the state government negotiating a mainland native title case at Hopevale in the state's north. The agreement, a heartening example of cooperation, was confirmed by the federal court.
The court congratulates the parties and their representatives on the resolution of the matter.
Also this week, the passing of a legend. Australia's last digger from the first landing at Gallipoli died, aged 101. Mr Ted Matthews from Sydney always stressed the importance of not glorifying the tragic events of Gallipoli.
They need reminding of the men who died to preserve their freedom and liberty.
The veteran, who acted as a self-appointed ambassador for peace, will have a state funeral. And after the break, our report on Christmas, Aussie style. Welcome back to Worldview. It's not without reason that Australia is known as the land of the long weekend. We all love an excuse to holiday, and our calendar is littered with events like Anzac Day, Easter, the Melbourne Cup and, of course, Christmas. Today, Worldview is focusing on the festive season, and we investigate the values and beliefs that underlie our celebrations. In many ways, Christmas this year will be very different from the ways our grandparents and great-great-grandparents celebrated in the past. Christmas passed almost unnoticed in the early years of colonial settlement. Back in convict days, Christmas cheer amounted to double rations and an issue of rum. But as free immigrants headed down under, our economy flourished. With new prosperity came new cheer. At first, celebrations retained a distinctly English flavour, and these old Christmas traditions have never been entirely abandoned, but instead acclimatised. A barbecue and a pavlova often replacing a roast and plum pudding. Australia's user-friendly climate ensures that outdoor activities form a large part of our festivities. Visits to the beach and Christmas cricket are virtually institutionalised. Christmas remains a time for reflecting on peace and remembering family. It was a holiday of special significance in the dark years of depression and war. Gradually, it has come to typify the complexity of Aussie life, a tug-of-war between tradition and innovation, spirituality and commerce. Christmas has become a curious amalgam of Santa and the Christ child. Over the Christmas period, attendance at church doubles, once-a-year pilgrims rubbing shoulders with the regulars in celebration of the birthday of Jesus. We've invited John Dixon, author and Christian evangelist, to comment on our Christmas festivities. To speak with him is Kel Richards.
John Dixon, what was Christmas like when you were a boy? Apart from being fun.
Yeah, well, I can remember when I was quite young, you know, that feeling of going to bed and trying to fall asleep before Christmas Day. You know?
Yeah, the anticipation thing.
Yeah, I think anticipation is what I remember most, and then waking up unbelievably early. And
why is it not light yet?
Yeah, that's right. And I can remember my brother and I used to share a room. I can remember saying, "Jamie, are you awake? It's Christmas." And we'd get up, and we used to have a stocking at the end of the bed, and you know, that whole thing. So great excitement, great anticipation.
Years ago in the Lucky Country, Donald Horne said that Christmas is not a Christian thing, it's all about family. In fact, he said that the three big celebration days in Australian culture are Anzac Day, the celebration of mateship, Melbourne Cup Day, the celebration of luck, and Christmas Day, the celebration of family, the festival of family. Is he right? Is that what Christmas is really about?
Well, I think he is right in one sense. I think the average person on the street thinks of it in terms of the festival of family, and all the great big carols, events that we see on television, without naming them, will kind of put across that idea of Christmas.
Any indication that that's changing? Is that still what Christmas means for Aussies?
People think of Christmas basically as the time of being good to each other.
Right.
And the unit where people feel most comfortable being good to each other, I think, is the family. And so I think family is still, a very core element of Christmas in a lot of people's minds.
And is there any sort of generational change? Is it different for kids today than it was for, say, their parents or their grandparents?
I suspect young people see it as a time when you're meant to be really nice and you're meant to be all into family and stuff. Unfortunately, so many young people aren't in nice, happy family situations, so the Christmas Day family get-together can actually be more painful than helpful, even though they think it's meant to be Christmas, I'm meant to be nice.
What place does Christmas have in a multicultural Australia? I mean, every so often we hear stories about an infant school somewhere or what have you, where they're not allowed to do carols by candlelight because there's concern it will offend this ethnic group or that ethnic group. So what's the significance of Christmas in a multicultural Australia?
I'm of the opinion that because we do live in a multicultural society, those kind of sensitivities do need to be pandered to. I mean, that might be the wrong word, but I think we need to be very sensitive to them. Australia no longer actually really claims to be a Christian country. So I don't think Christians should complain that some people don't like the Christmas story and don't like what it means. And so, for instance, someone of the Islamic faith may be offended at a Christmas carols at the school. And I think we have to be sensitive to those needs. And it may at times mean not having the Christmas carols, and I don't think in the end much will be lost.
Many of the larger carols by candlelight events, the big community events, the communal events, have been taken over by community groups. They used to be run by churches, they're now run by local councils or what have you. And in those cases, you know, Santa figures very large. Santa looms large in those, and the Bible just doesn't get a nod. Now, does that matter?
Well, I think what's going on there is the God stuff's a bit sort of embarrassing, and Santa's not. I mean, actually, he is. But in our cultural sort of the cultural feel is that Santa's more approachable than Jesus.
Safer.
He's safer, yeah. Doesn't call on you to be committed to anything, except maybe not be nice to the person on the bus on the way to work. That's maybe
you better be good. Good Santa Claus is coming to town.
Yeah, that's right. And so people want to latch onto something. There needs to be some kind of centre of Christmas. And it can't be Jesus because it's just a bit too confronting. So we've got this jolly figure, and he's nice, and we can all sort of appreciate what Santa represents. And so I think that's why Santa's come to the core of Christmas. I actually think it's sad because so often that whole Santa thing does represent a kind of over-commercialisation.
Okay, well, let's focus on what Christmas is really about. You talk about Jesus being confronting, but at Christmas time, people focus on Jesus as a baby. Now, that's not really very confronting, is it?
It comes from the significance. The baby in a manger is not very confronting, that's true. But because he in some way represents God, that immediately becomes confronting. So I think people can still appreciate a nativity scene in the local Westfield shopping complex or on a Christmas card or something. That's okay. But I think that, say, a church nativity play or a church carols where we actually talk about the significance of this baby in a manger, that's when it begins to become a little confronting.
Let's talk about that real meaning of Christmas, that real significance. Imagine you're at a high school, a couple of kids come to you and say, John, what is Christmas really all about? What's the short answer to that?
The meaning of Christmas, you've just got to look at the Christmas story, and it's all about a baby who is meant to be God's representative, which is what the term Christ or Messiah means, the one who represents God. And this baby, this one who represents God, was born in a small country town, laid in an animal feeding trough, which is all a manger is, with no one but shepherds there to applaud. And I think that tells us something about the nature of God that this Jesus represents. It tells us that God is into smallness. He's approachable. It tells us that he likes to get his hands dirty. It tells us that he is not into the glory and the power and the commercialism and all the sort of dazzling things. He doesn't mind entering into the world in the form of a small baby with hardly anyone there to take notice. But it tells us that this God is interested enough to enter into the world in Jesus. When you look at the baby in the manger, the baby in an animal feeding trough, you actually have the whole story of Jesus, the whole Christianity. The God who comes close, gets his hands dirty and eventually bloody for the sake of you and me.
John Dixon, many thanks.
If you'd like to respond to today's program, you can do so by phoning free call 1800 64 6494.
When we return, Hollywood revives the horror movie. Welcome back. Human beings have a natural tendency to cover up their actions when they do wrong. Shame and fear caused the first human beings, Adam and Eve, to hide from God, and very often the same sort of emotions drive us to lies and concealment. The best way to get rid of the burden of deceit is, of course, to confess and get a new start. Yet so often we prefer to hide from our past until it catches up with us. That's the plot of a new horror film, I Know What You Did Last Summer. Michelle Thomas reports.
I Know What You Did Last Summer could be described as a morality tale for the 90s. Not that the filmmakers take it all that seriously. The film is a pacey little piece of terror, very aware of its schlocky origins. 4 teenagers, Julie, Helen, Ray and Barry, finish high school and go for a midnight drinking session at the beach. As they huddle on the sand, they start telling ghost stories, which techhead Julie dismisses as just a warning for vulnerable teenage girls. But the story they tell turns out to be eerily imitated in their own lives, and the whole film becomes a spooky lesson for today's teenagers. The friends finish drinking on the beach and take a ride in Daddy's BMW. You can spot it a mile away, but lesson number 1 is don't drink and drive, especially in a BMW. They hit a guy on the dark cliff road and appear to have killed him.
Oh my God.
I think he's dead.
We can't just leave him here.
Oh, tell me, little Miss Prelaw, what's the charge for manslaughter? We make a pact. Right here, now we take this to our grave.
Lesson number 2 is don't lie to cover up your mistakes. Of course, the friends decide they can't tell the police what happened. After all, their college scholarships are at stake. Our hero Julie holds out, trying to do the right thing, but, and here's lesson number 3, peer pressure makes her capitulate. They decide to hide the body and never mention it again. A year passes. Out of the blue, Julie receives a letter which says, "I know what you did last summer." And it's on for young and old. This is where the horror part of the horror movie kicks in. Blood and guts, creepy music and scary chases down dark alleys. For your average teenager, this is all pretty par for the course. But in reality, it's pretty gruesome and probably not helpful for anyone. Still, teenagers will watch it. The teen horror flick is enjoying something of a revival under the hand of director Wes Craven, who also made Scream and Scream 2. Its popularity may have something to do with the testing of teenage boundaries. It's quite satisfying to sit safe and sound in the cinema and scare yourself stupid, but know that you'll be walking out happily afterwards. In fact, it's probably a better way for them to get their thrills than to go on joyrides or drinking sprees themselves.
I got run over. Helen gets her hair chopped off. Julie gets a body in a trunk, and you get a letter? That's balanced.
What body? What are you talking about?
Drop the act. You killed Max. You took my jacket.
Max is dead?
What is it with you, Ray? You were dogging us from the start, weren't you? Always wanting to be our friend, always wanting to be one of us, but you were too jealous to handle it.
Stop it! Look, we have to stick together, all right? We have to help each other.
Okay, so if it's not Fisher Boy here, who is it and how do we find him?
We think his name is Billy Blue.
How do you know that?
Missy said there was a friend named Billy Blue.
Who probably went to school with David Egan. So according to Sis, that would make him class of 92.
By God's standards, the horror genre is not ideal, but some may find it less disturbing than many violent action films or even thrillers. At least in this case, the baddie is just that, a bad guy doing the wrong thing, rather than the inexplicable, almost supernatural evil favoured by many horror films. And the kids are judged for their poor choices. It's rated MA, which at least will keep the younger teenagers away, and I've given it 5 out of 10.
Thanks, Michelle. After the break, Doug Drinnan shares the secret of contentment. Welcome back. New Year's Eve is a time when many of us look back on the year that's been. We remember its highlights and its disappointments. Often too, we make resolutions for self-improvements. We want to be healthier, happier and more successful. Yet at the end of the day, the things we thought would improve our lives don't necessarily make us more content.
G'day. Most bookstores these days are literally filled with books on self-improvement. It seems there's a great hunger out there for people to discover happiness and fulfilment. Like a number of books that I've got home myself, Happiness is a Choice, Dare to Dream, A Better Way to Live, and one called The Winning Attitude. Well, the bottom line of all these books is, what is the secret of contentment? The advertising industry today spends thousands of dollars in research trying to appeal to the longings of the human heart. The message that television and magazines bombard us with is this: you'll never be happy unless you own me. You'll never be worth anything unless you have more. Or you'll never be popular unless you dress and look like the rich and the famous. In other words, unless you own a BMW or win gold lotto or wear the right label, you'll never be content, you'll never be happy. Do you really believe that? Yet it seems as though so many of us are falling for a value system that's twisted. You see, I believe there are 3 major deceptions that we're falling into in the 90s. The first deception is having new things will bring happiness. You see, the ad man endeavours to convince us that life is ordinary unless you have the latest gadget or the right label. But I think that things go out of fashion, they lose their appeal, they break down. And then there's the concept that if I have more money, I'll be more important. So people are sold the view that their net worth equals their self-worth. Yet I've discovered that some of the most unhappiest people I've ever met are those who are wealthy. Have you ever seen a happy person in a casino? And the third deception is that if I'm popular, I'll be content, I'll be successful. But what about the ageing beauty queen or the footballer who can no longer get a game because he's slowing down? Popularity is a fleeting thing. You see, Jesus says, don't put your trust in riches. They're here today and then gone tomorrow. And the Bible also warns in the 10th commandment, do not covet. When I was 20 years of age, I guess I was like most other people, looking for fulfillment and contentment. But I was looking for it in the wrong places. I was trying to find happiness by being popular or being successful. And yet all the time I was empty on the inside. Then something changed. I discovered the secret of contentment when I asked Jesus Christ into my life. It was about that time I discovered my identity, that is, that I was a valued child of God, that He loved me just as He loves you. And at the same time, I found that God had a destiny for my life. He wanted me to make a difference in this world. Is there something missing in your life? Do you lack contentment? Why not ask Jesus Christ to be your Lord and Saviour? And then you'll discover that you too are a loved, valued child of God. And not only that, you'll find that God has a destiny for your life. He wants you to make a difference in this world for God and for good. I'm Doug Drinnan, and that's my worldview.
Our 1-800 number is designed to be your link back to us. Via the phone, you can make contact with someone who can talk to you about your concerns. When you ring, your call will be taken by a volunteer who's been trained to help. While we may not have all the answers at our fingertips, we will try to put you in contact with someone who does. If you agree, we can take your details and organise for someone in your area to take you through a course called Christianity Explained. There's no cost involved, and you're not put on a mailing list or asked for money at any stage. If you do have questions about Christianity, then don't ignore them. Find out some answers. Call 1-800-646494 and have Christianity Explained.
Well, that's all from us this week and this year. The Worldview team would like to thank you for your support over the past months and wish you all a very happy and blessed Christmas. Goodbye.